So good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us in our public program to exhibition of Future Generation Art Prize shortlisted artists. Our first part of public program is devoted to technologies and newest technologies in context of contemporary art, and we had several lectures and discussions already available online. And we are happy to welcome you on our offline event today. And I am happy to introduce to you Professor Jan de Mayer here with us. He is both as historian and neurobiology scientist. By these cards, using QR codes, you can read his article, which is connected to our lecture today. Today we will discover neuroaesthetics and the role of artificial intelligence in understanding of art, of works of art, on our perceptions. And I will pass the words to Mr. de Mayer. I will only mention that in several days, in a week, this lecture will be presented online with Ukrainian translation, so you are free to return back and to watch it. And Mr. Jan de Mayer, we are happy to see you here with us live, and happy to have you in Kiev. And here, the word is yours.
Well, what was the absolute dream from 1,000 years ago is to create and to understand the human mind. And we looked for explanations outside our own body, although the brain is embodied. The spirit and the mind we create with our application of the self on our ideas and on the way how we experience the context in which we live is a factor that now is studied by neuroscience, by technology, by the Big Brain project in Lausanne, and took a dramatic change in the last years with the deep machine learning and the artificial intelligence, who does a lot of things much better than human mind can do. But there's many things until now that artificial intelligence doesn't do. And I remember my first masterclass at Duke University 17 years ago. I started with the movie Young Frankenstein from Gene Wilder, where he evokes his father and plants his stiletto in his leg. But we'll do it more sober today with the evocation of the Victor Frankenstein syndrome. Neuroscience and connoisseurship. What is the problem of connoisseurship? That it is not an accumulation of knowledge. And in the studies we did at the Wellcome Institute, we saw that all form of genius is a shortcut, is almost avoiding the rules, like a corruption of the mind. And I think in many countries there's a lot of corruption of justice, of the mind, of all kinds of systems. But since art is a meaning who wants to be believable and truthful, there's no criminality in art. Everything what experienced by us as art, and we name art, is it, and when we are more than one, we share it, and that's our opinion at the moment where we express it, and it might change tomorrow. One of my other books is The Masterpiece in the Brain, and I was looking to the extreme experiences that art evokes not only from the earliest cave paintings to Murakami, but all over the spectrum, where artists, in my opinion, are seen as the discoverers of the laws of the brain. And you all know Frankenstein, and the idea of creating a human is already an obsession with the Greeks and Prometheus. So that's why Mary Godwin, who was the daughter of a scientist, who believed that electricity could bring life. So when she was traveling at that time, 1815, 1816, with her lover, Percy, they met Byron, and through that travel they passed a castle, the castle of Frankenstein. That's the castle near Gerntheim, and then they went to the Lake of Geneva, where they started to make a kind of competition. And they didn't play chess, but they made with Byron and Percy and Mary a competition to invent something. To invent something mysterious, to invent something novel, an essay that would give a thrill. And Prometheus is a warning by the Greek gods for the danger of curiosity and for the obsession. And everything what human genius created was product of curiosity and obsession. Because there's no genius without 10,000 hours of application and a great curiosity, and most of the multi-high potential people who make things go on, like Elon Musk or others, have that kind of drive. So, it's just passing near to the big hole, the big danger in which we easily fall when our curiosity is not really giving the wonderful idea that we search for. So the birth of all science is fiction. There is no science without hypothesis. And lots of science is therefore born in the non-conscious mind. With my friend Lionel Lacache of the CNRS in France, who is the head of the research in La Pitié-Salpêtrière, we studied also categories of cues, so mind information, who were non-conscious and could emerge to consciousness. And with my friend Steve Lorace, we worked on limited states of awareness by people who are in coma. So you see that consciousness is not something that is given or that is easy to understand, because in many cases we are not aware that somebody is aware. And to go back to the first idea of Godwin, Luigi Galvani, in Italian, thought that the living force in nature was electricity. And that was corrected later on, a few years later, by Volta at the University of Pavia. But you see how in 1791 people believed that science would bring the most extreme progress. And Victor Frankenstein is a kind of modern Prometheus, because he studied the alchemists. He tried to understand what beauty was and what the relation between truth and beauty was. And then when he creates his monster, he is horrified by the ugliness. And the creature, as in the Bible, asks for a female partner. And he said, no, you're too ugly, I will not give you something similar female. And then the monster, he fled. The monster went, said, I will be there the night of your wedding night. And so meddling with nature is destroying the self, which the ecologists today are extremely aware of. And the curse of Frankenstein is that humanity destroys its own nest, destroys the world in which we are living. And we have an extraordinary complexity of the embodied brain. There's nothing of the mind that is produced outside of the activity of the brain. That those who are interested in those limits can see the publications by Steve Flores, Limited States of Consciousness. When I started in neuroscience, the big question was, is the brain and our neurons, are they specialized or are they a holist? Can they do everything? And the question is, like in the quantum mechanics, yes, yes. They're and specialized and holist. They can do everything, but not at every stage and not everywhere. They're born out of the neurogenesis, and they get information at each stage where they pass. And so they create by their own experience a determination and limitation of their activity. So here we see what on this side, what the normal activity is of a state of consciousness. And you see the green interaction is an activity that has to be controlled, like all brain activity and bodily experiences, even those of which we are unconscious of. There has to be an inhibitory aspect. And the regulation of that passes somewhere here beyond the four lobes of the prefrontal cortex. And when we have a problem, we are in coma, or we have a great accident and we are not conscious anymore, then it's mostly the link between thalamus pallidum and striatum who is not working. And that's very new. We know that since 2 or 3 years that those activities are essential for our state of awareness. Now, I'm only a specialist of cognitive perception. So my PhD was, how do we know what we see? And I put a number of top connoisseurs in the scanner to see what happened in their brain when we show these images. And you see that most of the specialized neural structures who analyze each one a specific category of the image are situated here in a number of areas that Brodmann made an inventory of, but they all come from our retina. They all come from the nerve of the eye, and they are vehiculated to V1 is the first zone. But before that, we already have some incoming information, because at every stage of everything what we do, there's a backlash. Who has a voluntary or an inventory inhibitory system. And so art and most of our expressions who are not connected to the reality as we think it is a kind of emotion, the art experience. And they are based on complex data cues in function of the brain's memory and of the self. And it's basically each happiness or moment where we struck by beauty or by something fantastic, it's a stabilized ambiguity, because with all the scenarios who come for us, It's our memory who consciously projects scenarios on the incoming stimuli, and we think we recognize something. That gives a meaning, and if that meaning has roots in the self and the history, the narrative we reproduce about the self, then we feel happy. If it's strange, if it's disturbing, we can have other feelings. We can have fear, we can have worries, we can have all kinds of expressions who are also emotions of a special kind. And those emotions are lived in a community because we are social animals. And if you see all the people here of the Pinchuk Prize, they're all aware of the fragility of being, of how minimal ideas and expressions and specific conditions of life have to be respected, and in an optimal world, in a wonderful world, in heaven, everything works out wonderful, but also merciless. Nature is unforgiving. Now, in the latest developments of artificial intelligence, we come to a form of transhumanism. And transhumanism is an enhancement of the human condition by technology. And it has a target. And now, if we try to embellish or to make more efficient our mind and our brain, then it's not our creation. It's the creation of somebody else who brings in an algorithm, and in the deep machine learning now, that algorithm is transferred to machines who combine it with older algorithms, but they create then themselves a new algorithm, and that's really the moment where the real artificial intelligence starts. And luckily for us, there are many ways of being intelligent. You have emotional and social and other ways of intelligence, and the machine has only now a mathematic, rational, computing possibility. But as soon as we can give emotions to machines, well, they will express their emotions. And so they will express what they like. And if they create art, it will be art that responds to their fundamental condition. And so those ultra-intelligent machines are basically the contemporary Prometheus, the Frankenstein of the moment. And the question is, if we unleash the beast, where it will bring us. And that's one of the great questionings. Now, art was seen, and you see it here also in this exhibition, as a salvation, as the mirror of the ontological self, as the mirror of all meanings that we find in the disconnection of what we see as art and that reality. And there's no art without abstraction and without reduction. All art is abstract, even the most figurative Caravaggio, as you see here, and you see here Narcissus, who mirrors himself in the water. And it's the last frontier, because if, like Narcissus, we drown in the image of ourselves, well then the algorithms will take over, and they will create their proper abstractions and reductions on which we don't have the power to intervene, except to pull the plug of the machine. But probably, if they're smart, and they will be, they will try to prevent that. That's the next question. How will we master machines if pulling the plug is not enough? And then the loss of our subjectivity, the loss of our epigenetic enhancement of our DNA through the early stages of life and later on also, as it is inscribed in our genetic capital, will be taken over by those machines who will modify and make themselves more efficient. But to what target? The bias of each of the creators of each algorithm will be in. Will they eliminate it? Will they polarize it? Will we have a new Mussolini or Adolf in the machines, and then Mother Teresa also? And will they? How will they keep on with themselves and the others? So everything in the machines for the moment is conscious. If we are able one day to create emotion in those machines by insulating a history of life and experience that they can develop themselves, then those machines will have an unconscious dimension. And our unconsciousness is beyond our control. But their consciousness will also be out of our control. Here you see what the main motor is of human life is the limbic reward system. And it works by the hypothalamus, and it sits at the center, lower part of the brain, and it's extremely connected to the cervelet, who is the first part of the brain that reptiles have also, and connected to our story. And our story is our story, but the way we present ourselves and tell our story, it's another thing. And we know, and there are many crooks in business and everywhere, but they don't have a future if they don't tell a nice story. In a certain way, we all tell a nice story about ourselves. So art is an essential evolutionary strategy to explore the world and our expectations about it. And that you see from the cave paintings of 10, 15, 20, 30, 35,000 before Christ, up to here in the PinchukArtCentre. Now, what is a masterpiece? Masterpiece is something that is like in gastronomy or in movies or in music, something that is evaluated by some who have followers, and they all together make a kind of movement to select this. And so at a certain moment, let's say the romantic spirits in the 60s, they thought Che Guevara was a nice guy. So you saw a lot of people with a t-shirt with Che Guevara. He was less nice than we thought, but he was not important. It was the image we had from him that we presented as something to be imitated. And art asks for imitation because it wants to be shared, it wants to be played on like all music. And we saw that the will to life is the will basically in the prehistory to mate and to procreate. So there's no art without an erotic dimension, even if the erotic dimension is covered by discourse, by aesthetics, by a great number of things. And we have here, I made in the slideshow a little overview of some ideas who each were presented as great solutions. And basically we see, like in philosophy, it's always a certain aspect of the way how we live our life out from a perspective of certain convictions. And Bourdieu, Benjamin, Schleiermacher, Nietzsche, and many others had a view, and that view was taken in account. And it had an influence, it biased our perception. Because what you know make a difference when you see it for the sixth time. You never walk twice through the same river, because you changed, the river changed, and the water flows, and your life goes. The only thing with which we can escape all troubles of reality is our imagination. Some, like Einstein, use it for science. Other create their own world, like artists do. And now artificial intelligence, when it develops independently out of our reach, will they also develop a mind and a kind of simulacre of free will like we have one? Because all our actual decisions are these that we had already preconceived by our earlier choices. So the only thing we have is here we have a switch there in the frontal lobes where we can stop, say no, and that's a fraction of a second. And in the fMRI scanner, you see it, a fifth of a second before somebody will decide it. So is it then his own decision? Consciously, no. It's a decision that is brought up after the menu of attitudes he takes, function of his morality, in function of what he likes, in function of his altruism and his selfishness. So the experience of art and the experience of religion and of great gustative pleasure and of drugs are essentially illusions of the brain to escape reality. And life events make for everybody your epigenotype, what you have specific as unique human being. And what in a certain community, because you are brought up together, you come from the same area, and so you have the same roots, but you grow out in a different way. And there are many now evolutions and a better understanding of how we modify ourselves through chromatin proteins and non-coding iron, our own genotype and our own way of reproducing what we are when we make children. So, can AI create a masterpiece? Well, they can derive from a number of things something. But the definition of a masterpiece is that it has a precedent. It's not the heritage of something. It's a new invention. It has its impact because it always is available to be confronted to new minds who find more in it than they can imagine themselves. And so if it's not surpassing the horizon of our expectations, it's not a masterpiece. So there are not that many masterpieces for humanity all over our human culture, and those masterpieces are distributed over all cultural expressions of everything. And then the problem with Duchamp, was seen as the father of contemporary art somewhere, is that there's the intentional fallacy. The artist's intention ontologically is not essential because it's only a cognitive bias. What counts is the emotion that it brings. And if abstraction brings emotion, well, then it works. And I have had a colleague at Duke University, Ingrid Dobschi, and she was she won a great prize in mathematics. She developed the JPEG and other IE applications, and she can talk to me about the beauty of mathematical formula. So it's all about that, and basically, if you take the parallel with the artificial intelligence, well, then it's all about your expectations, the way how you educated yourself, and the way how it fulfills you so much that there's no any additional desire. Because at a certain moment, you have that in religious practice also, or people who do yoga, or my friend Mathieu Ricard, they come in a state of trance. And you have in the Siberian community, you have the shamanic representatives, and it's all quite explainable now in neuroscience what kind of state it is. And you see here in the special zone, it's not an antenna from above who comes in, it's we who concentrate, and our tunnel sight when you're in coma and you come out of the coma, which I wish to everybody who is in coma, then that tunnel sight is really something that is a configuration of the way that the energy who was only at one point comes back again into the whole brain and starts functioning again. All art is a difference with what nature brings. Here you see the image of the water lilies in the pond of Giverny by Monet. Can artificial intelligence create from that such an image that gives us so much joy and that learns us things that were not learnable in 1915 when Monet created them? And will they go on fascinating us and bringing new insights? I was well acquainted with Willem de Koning, and at the end of his life I saw his paintings and drawings when he already had an advanced state of Alzheimer. And there were wonderful things in it. And there was a coherence, and there was something. But there were lots of things missing. And so, in the limited states of consciousness, in the limited expressions of the brain, we see better what the essential aspect is of why we love and we create art and we love art. Here you see one of the earliest examples, and you see how fantastic of aesthetic quality this is. Many people draw, but not so many people draw with that quality. And so that state of beauty, the sublime, is the product of our neurons. You see here a neuron with its synapses, and it works over the cortex from down to up in different systems, neurons, axons, and so on. I will not go too far in that, but it's an engine, and we now know better and better how that engine works. But that doesn't mean that we can't control it better, because the more we know, the more we see that, well, if we know where it passes and what activates it, then the control and inhibitory systems are still a mystery for us. We did with autist children probes with oxytocin, and the mothers were delighted because for the first time that child could express his emotion to the mother, and that was for the mothers a great gift, but a great frustration, because we had to tell them, okay, it's once, it's an experience. Because we do the same thing, and we have a dog, and the child will bond with the dog. So we have, even if we know what are the neurotransmitters, it's not necessary that we know how to modify it. Now back to the cognitive perception. Everything what we see is a kind of input on the retina, which worked with a backlash. In that backlash has an ongoing enrichment of information. If you go here to a room, a first impression and second impression, and often the day after you might have a reflection of it that gives a totally other insight than what the meaning of the artist is. That's why the intentional fallacy works in art and is a given, because what the meaning of the artist, what he wants to obtain, is not relevant, because all the bad artists, all the artists you never select, the thousands and thousands and thousands of people, they all have the same intention of doing something great and something fantastic. So that intention of that artist, it's not great because we selected it. It's great because the experience it evokes in art is something who is telling for you. That's why people come here and don't go elsewhere. They come here and they don't go for a drink. They go for a drink afterwards or before. So 40% of the brain, more than 40%, is dedicated to vision. Here you have a short view on the visual cortex and the way how an image is constructed. And from the bottom up, each special neuron who calculates light and dark, colors, inclinations, shapes, and so on, is a cluster where the neurons are trilling in a synchrone mood. That gives the definition in the brain of a brain cue, a brain information object. Now, there's a physiology of craving. And one of the big discussions we have now with the Institut Pasteur and my master of my PhD, Jean-Pierre Changeux, who was a great expert in nicotine neurotransmitters, is why and how we can activate the giving end of the synapse in connection to the receiving end. Because with drug addicts, the receiving end is open, craving, and permanent. And in a normal situation, it's a few thousandths of a second that it opens, it absorbs, it combines. And so during the drug use, you force the system that you blow up the engine of your car. How will you repair it? Well, that's the question that medicine and poses now to all kinds of drugs. Nothing is perfect, so all our views are biased. And that's a kind of analysis of a few hundred of possible cognitive biases who affect our views. So you can look to which of whom you're the most sensitive, because it's different for each of us, and other people's opinions infer strongly on our own opinion. And now what you see is Dali's slave market, but if you close your eyes half, you see in the middle the head of Voltaire, black and white. You see that? Painting is illusion. I had, the first time I came here was with Eliasson. When I was lecturing at La Charité in Berlin, he came to attend those lectures, and then that was one of the first reasons I came here to Kiev. But already, without really knowing how the brain works, Dali and many other artists anticipated by their genius the laws of the brain, and they know how it works. And illusion is wonderful because it's a kind of departure from reality in a multiple way. So in the more senses are implicated in the joy of the event, the better it is. And here you see how such an image of the head of Voltaire is computed to the brain in different superposed results of all kinds of different neurons we have, who all give their own input. And if you're Daltonian, or if you have a defect in one of the areas after a stroke, or by nature, or by an accident or a disease, well, one of those translations is impaired, and you don't see the great icons of art as if normality exists, normal, optimal people see it. And you have here one side a kind of idealized version of Mona Lisa, and the other the most intriguing self-questioning by Rembrandt. It's not a self-portrait, it's a portrait of somebody else. But if it affected people in his time, and it still affects us, then it's more than a photograph, it's more than a presence. It tells something about the questioning of our certainties in our world that we still don't know, and that's why we still look at it. And here you have in the middle Duchamp, and on the left Da Vinci, and a studio painting on the right there. And then you see what the difference is between a masterpiece and somebody who is a good painter. It's the right image is much nearer to reality. And he worked with better materials, so the copy cost more than the original. Then, if we look at the Mona Lisa, we ask the question, why? How do we compose that smile who is not there? If you look only to the mouth, you don't see it. If you look to the eyes and the mouth, the fact that you're intrigued by both makes that your eyes doesn't focalize. So the smile is mysterious. And every lady knows that she has to keep her secret until the end, because otherwise the seduction is not effective. Now, if you see the difference in the work by an artist like Rubens, who has some paintings who are worked out by himself, and others he delegated to his studio, like Sol LeWitt did with his wall paintings. And you can ask the question, how artful is that art? And if there are different hands who do a Sol LeWitt painting, well, then mathematically they can be the same. So what is the best, if we can ask that question? And art is open to all qualification of the doubt. So it's not an artist who can say, okay, again we come back to the big problem in Duchamp's idea and other people's ideas, that the intentional fallacy in art is something who make the artist redundant, but the triumph of the work of art that he makes. The chicken only is worth the act it produces. And we have questions. Quality in art is also the opinion of others. And not so many, except very few great connoisseurs, investigate things, and they have, with the new possibilities of art history, who developed since the 18th century, a rational measurement by categories of certain things. And the first who explained to Marie Antoinette, the French queen, was the German Winkelmann. And you have a whole evolution of not only criteria that one tried to implicate on art, but basically now we know that all those formal rules of the Classicism and the Baroque and the Renaissance, and even what Vasari said about Manierism and Michelangelo, you can say the same about a copy, a bad copy, a good copy, and the original. So it doesn't mean anything. It's just a way of shifting the sand. And if you have a diamond in it, it will blow up and catch your eye. So we have, from that reality, a reduction, an abstraction of movement and light. That gives a meaning, and that meaning has to be truthful. That meaning has to be important for the human spirit and the human nation as such. And we have phantom masterpieces, hidden concepts that work in a way we're not aware, but they work nevertheless. So in the artwork you see, there is as much what you see as what you don't see, because what you don't see is the projection of yourself on your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind is very different as what Freud said about the subconscious mind. We don't have subconscious mind, it's a concept. On part of the production of the mind that is considered as such, but basically my friend Lionel Lacache wrote a wonderful book on, edited by Odile Jacob about 10 years ago, on the categories of knowledge that can merge into consciousness from the unconscious mind. And not all categories can do that, but that's a lecture on itself. So basically art learns us about ourselves, about the man who created it, or the woman who created it, or the robot who created it. And it helps us understand in an unconscious, non-verbal way the laws of the brain and the limits of human creativity. And that's an exhibition I opened some years ago in the Museum of Lille, where a strip designer, Zepp, who designs Titeuf, projected his images, moving images, on paintings and sculptures, and it was a wonderful exhibition. We had, I don't know, 300,000 or 400,000 visitors, many children. But art can also be a conviction, an ideology, and just a simple effect of one kind of neuron who is solicited here, and that's the black and white cluster, who is confronted with the formal aspect of lines and shapes. And those create attention, and so we can speak of a real and a fake Malevich. And there was in Ghent, in the museum, we had a very advanced curator there who, from a Russian crook, took a whole collection of fake avant-garde. I believe she was fired. One of our ministers made the promotion for the exhibition. He's still a minister, so it was less worse for him than for the stupid curator. But it's possible to see, because quality matters. And even in such limited aspects, quality matters. So modernism, neoclassicism, contemporary art are concepts who go with the time. And the contemporary art of today will be a style of the past. And here you see a real Pollock. There you see a fake that was sold in 2007 for 15 million by the Galerie Knöder to a Belgian collector in London. And when he invited me in 2009 to visit his collection, and I told him, I said, yes, you don't say much about my paintings. I understand you're a specialist about master paintings, but you could say something about it. That it would be better to have the original ones. So the case started, and they all were fakes, his Rothkos and so on, and more than 120 paintings was sold by big galleries, Christie's, Sotheby's, and all that, as absolute fakes. So, but it's visible. And it's visible if we go back to the original, because you have a fractality, a repetition of initial forms in different dimensions that you see here, that you don't see in this, with a kind of spaghetti with some ketchup and other things. So I told the gentleman who was not very happy, if you shit in your eyes, you have to wipe it out from time to time. And don't buy that kind of paintings if you don't understand what it is about. And art is about that. It's about honesty, it's about intellectual honesty, and also about the sublime. And the sublimation, if you see Mark Rothko's The Menil Chapel, and see how he conceived it and why he conceived it, then you come to the kind of experiences that Ediafur Ediasson created here with his room where it all was misty and light and all kinds of experiences go. And you see that the transcendental dimension of human values, even for humans, can be biased by media recognition, celebrity status, TikTok, Facebook, other things. But the question is, what makes art? Well, what you think it is. Thank you.